Thank you very much, Topher, and thank you all for joining me on this conversation about GraphQL and Magnolia. Now, I'm very excited to be here today to share this with you. This is a brand new technology we've just released, and this is going to help you get your content to your customers even faster than before. So let's go ahead and jump into the conversation, shall we? First, a little about me. My name is Scot Rhodes. I'm a senior solution architect with Magnolia. I've got over 20 years of experience in digital experiences in various different markets, and I've been with Magnolia for almost 3 years now. So, what is GraphQL? GraphQL is a type-safe query language that is intended to query those APIs on your server side. One of the really great things about GraphQL is that there are already so many tools available to you. There are things like VS Code extensions that we're going to show today. You've got things like the Apollo provider, which helps make the development effort even easier than it already was. And yes, and we now have that integrated to Magnolia. So what did we do with the GraphQL within Magnolia? Well, we have basically taken one of the major burdens off your hands. So if you're familiar with GraphQL, you probably are aware that you have to spend some time building your schemas, sorting algorithms, and various other things. Well, with Magnolia, you don't have to do any of that. We've taken that all off your hands. Basically, once you've built a content type and a content app, you have already done all the heavy lifting. You are ready to go to start developing your front end using the content from those different systems, which is very awesome. So yes, your schema is now going to be available to you once you have completed that. Let's take a look real quick at what the content apps look like. First, let's take a look at the Books app, because that's what we're going to be focused on today. And so we have this content app where you have various books, and as you can see, we've got a couple categories of books, and there's 6 books in our system right now. And if we want to get those to our customers, we can use the query API. I'm sorry, the GraphQL. All right, now what's that look like on the back end? If you take a look at Visual Studio Code, here is our data source which defines that book. And once you have that, you already have your GraphQL API set up and ready to go. You've got things like data querying algorithms. You've got sorting algorithms. You've got referential data connections set up for you already. As you see in this, we have things like name and authors. And authors is actually a reference to a different content app. But you don't have to worry about that because GraphQL is going to handle all of that for you. Okay, so now that we've seen what the content type looks like, let's go ahead and take a look at something called Graphical. Now, Graphical is an app that we have integrated within Magnolia, as you see down here. Once you open this up, you have your graphical interface where you can start writing some general queries. And now here's a simple query. In fact, this is the query that we're going to use in our code example for today, where we're going to retrieve some books, and we're going to request things like title and description. We're also going to request assets. So this is an image that is attached to that content type. We have authors, as we mentioned already, and from that we just want to derive the name. We can also get things like metadata. So in here we see you can grab the ID, but you can also grab things like the template that it's using or the path, which is the more common one that you'd want to reference. So anyways, in this graphical UI, you can just run that query before putting it into your code to make sure it works. And there you go, it works. We have a list of books. Here's on the origin of species. Here's a brief history of time. So, and all the data that we want to associate with it, including links to our images, and not just our images, but the different image renditions. Okay, so that's Graphical in a nutshell. So let's take a look now and see how all this code works together. All right, so back to Visual Studio Code we go. Here we are back at this is the content type itself, but here we have, we're making use of the Visual Studio Code extension for Apollo GraphQL. And this is really great because this will hook up directly to the Magnolia GraphQL instance. and automatically retrieve things like the schema and those sorting algorithms that I mentioned. And it'll also give you things like IntelliSense, so you can have code completion, so you can avoid those pesky typos. And to set that up, it's really simple. Once you've installed the component, you just need to include this Apollo config file, as you see here, and point to the host, which in my case I'm running locally. So here's my GraphQL host, and once I have saved that off, you will be able to see that we have this Apollo client set up. I can just make a simple change, and I'm going to instantaneously go and reload that Apollo container. So now we actually can jump directly into the code and get that IntelliSense. One other thing to point out before getting to the code is the Apollo provider I had mentioned. It's really simple to set up. You just install it to your app, you wrap your app around within the Apollo provider, and you point to a client. So once again, it's just a URL at the end. And that's it. Now you have that client available across all of your code base. And speaking of the code base, let's take a look at that simple book list. So as you see here, that's the exact query that we just ran in GraphQL and Magnolia. And we're going to use that same query within our app in order to basically show the books. And as you see, again, we have that same content here. But if we wanted to modify this, we can start doing that and get that IntelliSense that I had mentioned before. So let's say we want to see, or we want to add the publish date to that. That's quite easy. And not only do you get the code completion, but you get to see the data type that it's associated with. So in this case, publish date is a date. If you want publisher, that's just a simple string. So it's very, very handy. And you can also look at authors. Authors is its own content or its own type called author. So it makes life so easy using this Apollo client or Apollo extension within Visual Studio Code on top of your Magnolia server. So yeah, as you see, that will grab the content that we want. And then, because we're using that Apollo provider, you don't have to worry about going through the fetch routines and handling the fetch, because Apollo provider provides you with a use query function. You just call that query, and it will either return you some data, that's what we hope we get back in return, or it'll give you an indicator that it's still loading the data, so you can print something else to the screen. It'll also give you an error message. So it's a JSON formatted error message to give you information about what you did wrong with your query. But if you're using GraphQL, you won't have that problem. So as you see here, we grab those things, and then we just pass them into this component, which then does the rendering of these books. And just to show you what that's going to look like, if we open up in Magnolia, here's our Pages app, and we have the bookshelf here. And so we open up the bookshelf, and as you see, we get all 6 of those books because it's a simple component. We're not doing any kind of sorting, we're not doing any kind of pagination, and we're not doing any filtering. This is just all the books that we have listed here. So as you see, we grab the image appropriately, nice. We get the title of the book, we get the author information, that's just the name that we requested, and a little shortened bit from the description. So yeah, all of our content is there and rendered on the screen. And it's that simple. I'm very, very excited about it because it makes life so much easier. If you've worked with Magnolia in the past, working with the SPA apps like React or Angular or Vue, then you know that you have to set up these REST endpoints, and you have to set up a different REST endpoint for each thing you want. And in this case, we don't have to do that. So let's take a look back. All right, that was what is GraphQL. So we have now been seeing it in action. Right, so let's go back to the code really quick, because now I want to show you how easy it is to work with this. So you've seen some examples, but you haven't seen it really in action yet. So let's say we want to modify that content type, which will then modify the schema. Well, again, because the content type is completely managed, or the GraphQL API is completely managed by the content type, we can just simply modify the content type here. And so let's take a look at how that would work. So I've created a decorator here, and this decorator is just simply going to add product details to our book. And with those product details, it's a complex type. So let's just make sure that it's not there already. So let's just typing in product. There's no product details there. So let's go back over to our book YAML, and we're going to just select this and save that off. And now we should see that once we've now done all the work with the schema. Magnolia has now registered all of those different new types and even new sorting algorithms. Okay, one thing you have to keep in mind, you have to go ahead and update your Apollo config. You just saw that it triggered the reload. So now we've reloaded, and now we should be able to go back into here and just start typing. And automatically, product details is there. There's that product details complex type. So from there, we can go ahead and request the media type, which is a string. We can go ahead and request page num. So it's a long number. And then we have this other complex type, dimensions, which is composed of height, width, and depth. Okay, and that's it. Bang, it's all ready to go. And now what we can do is actually run within a terminal here. I can just start up a local server because you have to redeploy the code to Magnolia to see it inside of Magnolia. And I've apparently been clogging up my ports today. And as you see here, oh, we already have DE at the end of that, but we want to have, okay, as you see, now we've added that new component, which gives us paperback and hardcover, tells us how many pages are in that, and the dimensions. And here it is in inches. There it is as a hardcover, 388 pages. And there it's in inches because it's English and it assumes that it's American English. But let's say this was a German customer. Now we can open that up, and now we have the German words for just that, of course. I did a little magic on the back end for that. But now we get centimeters. So anyways, that's just a cool little thing I added on top of this. Okay, and so that's how it works. It's that easy. We have really reduced the amount of effort required by your developers in order to get this kind of functionality built in. And what I'd like to show you really fast as well is some of the more complex aspects of this. And so that's a simple book type. Again, we're not having any content editors interacting with this component at all. But let's say we did want to allow that. So here we have the very similar type of query, but in this case, we're allowing the content editors to have some effect on this, where we're going to tell them how many books can we show, what rendition names can we use, what sorting algorithm do we want to use. And by the way, again, the sorting algorithm, that's all built for you. So if you want to automatically sort by title ascending, descending, there you go. Maybe description, ascending, descending. But we don't want to do that. We want to do this. So this will allow the customer now to interact. And just to show you very quickly how that looks on the Magnolia side, here's my bookshelf, and I've already prepared some books. And so in this case, I actually need to modify my component because it says 1900 and it's actually not. It's 1950. So here we are, 1900. So let's go ahead and let the customer change the date range of books that we want to see. And there you go. These are the books between 1900 and 2000. Here's a set of books before 1950, and there it is in German. So we only have the one book in German. But yeah, so you can see the localization is also very easy to work with. That's just a matter of passing in the localization indicator. And there you have it. I am very excited to see what you guys can all do with this. It's an amazing technology. And we have now released this to the world. So please have at it. I would also like to point you in the direction of our documentation because it's pretty good. And some information about the GraphQL app, as well as all the sample code that I used today is all available to you here. And so I'm going to make all of that available to you immediately. So please go at it and let's see what you can do with this. I'm very excited. And now I think I'll pass things back over. Thank you all very much for your time. And please feel free to reach out to me at Magnolia or if you have any questions. And yeah, let's do some questions.